Now then, welcome to the Wedding Mavericks podcast, a podcast for wedding photographers, videographers and other creative wedding suppliers. In this episode, we're continuing to look at the back end of our business in the quiet season. And following on from last episode where we discussed goals and action plans, we are now looking into how we manage our workload and our revenue goals for the coming years. So...
yeah. Let's get straight into this one, I think, Drew.
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, so bit of a disclaimer to begin with, because there's the risk, of course, with this one sounding like another little bit of a boring, kind of too businessy-centric type topic. But absolutely, we want to sort of discuss today's topic because we think it's so important, really, when it comes to not only the success of your business, but also... when we're thinking about protecting our health and well-being in running our businesses.
Yep.
Something which I know that many people will have struggled with, over this past year or two.
Yep, totally, yeah.
So in the previous episode, we were discussing goals, we were discussing action plans.
Yep.
We ourselves did some action plans, and hopefully from that, we now have a better idea. I certainly feel like we have a better idea about what it is we're hoping to achieve, and how, most importantly, how we plan about going about achieving those goals that we set this year. And this kind of topic area as a whole that we're working through is something that, in terms of sort of today's episode, we really want to build upon what we set out to achieve in the last one. So we're going to kind of enhance that, sort of add to that, if you like, because really now incorporating into our planning, we need to start thinking about realistically how much work can we actually do.
Yeah.
Coupled with
how much money.
Work. Yeah, how much work do we want to do? But absolutely, this is our livelihoods, and it could be that you're in a similar position as to us. So yeah, absolutely, how much money do we want to make? How much money do we need to make out of this also? So certainly just looking forward to the next episode, focusing in on costs that we incur in the business and also looking at pricing strategies. That's what we're going to move on to next. But just kind of in terms of today's episode, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking really at how do we plan and manage our workload in an effective way. So Jules, now that we are kind of thinking about planning our own days, so we've thought about what our goals are.
Yep.
And when it comes to making our plans for whether it's the days, the weeks, the months that are ahead, where do we even start? Because I think in the interest just of being completely honest with you, we'll tell you straight away that this is something that we've actually found really challenging over the course of the last few years.
Absolutely.
So, and I think, you'll straight off the bat, you'll tell us something, you know, why it has been so challenging, the kind of to and froing of, what is the right number? Yeah. What is the right kind of, how do we get to a point where we understand what's the right amount in terms of a workload? Yeah.
And so the answer to that is going to be slightly different for everybody. Yeah. But I think the best place to start is kind of that bad story, because everyone loves a bad story, don't they? So let's say last year, I can't actually, at this point, I haven't had the time to go through and actually count the exact number of weddings that we did last year, because I could tell you at certain points what we were likely to be doing, because I'd worked them out in advance, a bit like what we're going to talk about in this episode. But because I'm still editing the ones from last year, I haven't gone through and counted them all, and because there was ones that came up in and amongst that we thought we should take it, and it wasn't there, earlier on in the year. So it was definitely over 40. I would say it wasn't quite 50, but it was somewhere in the 40 to 50 region. And that was 2021. And I would say that we only did 3, I think, prior to July. Maybe 4 or 5. But basically, there was 30-something, definitely 30-something at the last count between July and December, which, you know, is in 6 months doing nearly 40 weddings is ridiculous. And I suspect that there's a lot of people that were in exactly the same position. And from what I've seen and what I understand, there's so many people that actually did more than that. You know, there was people that did 50 or 60 in that space of time, which I have no idea. But I suspect that from thinking about the posts I've seen, the people that did say they did that many, they were photographers, which doesn't necessarily make it okay and make it, you know, completely easy. But from my own, from our experience, editing photos is not as labour intensive as editing video, so you can probably fit more in without losing your mind and being too overworked. So yeah, that was last year, and 2020, we'll just forget that happened. 2019 was the same. So we did over 40 weddings. It was extremely difficult. And at the same time, we were studying, we were both doing degrees and doing 40 weddings and with the kids. 2019 nearly broke us, didn't it?
Madness, absolutely. Yeah.
And 2019 is exactly the reason why we are having this conversation. Last year was a bit of an anomaly, and we don't want to repeat that anomaly if we can do anything about it. But this year, 2019 was basically every business goes through phases, and that was our phase of where it takes off, and you're so busy because the demand is there for people are booking you, which is great because obviously you're doing something right and what have you. And it will feed nicely into, I'm not going to go into that in loads of detail because it feeds nicely into some of the next topics we're talking about, which is pricing. But essentially, it's that year where things are taking off for you and you haven't quite sorted out your pricing and you haven't quite sorted out what you don't actually know what's coming. You know, that would have been our sort of third year in business, but kind of we were 2.5 years in, I would say, by the time we got to there. And it sort of really takes off and you just like, you know, you don't know what to expect. So it's only when you actually experience that or somebody can properly explain it to you who's experienced it that you actually think, crikey, I need to be ready for that.
Yeah. I remember actually, so it was 2019. We were at New Craven Hall in Leeds, and we were working on a wedding with Victoria Baker. Yeah, fantastic photographer. And we were sat talking to Victoria, and she'd been asking how the year was going. And so it's in August. It's right in the middle of the busy wedding season, and I just remember, you know, just at that point, burnout. Yeah, already feeling burnout. You know, and we still had plenty to do. Oh yeah, months ahead of us. Yeah, let alone the editing that was coming. And you know, let's be honest about it. Our wedding films, you know, the end product that we are able to deliver to our clients, you know, that's down to Jules. You since day one, he's been the one that has edited all our wedding films, has put those together for us. So we'd just been riding the wave of, you know, this is fantastic. Oh my goodness, you know, the momentum that this has gathered for us. Working really hard, doing all of these weddings, but actually as well with that in the background, just trying to keep your head above water with the edits that were going on in the background. And so I just will always remember that moment speaking to Victoria and just saying to her, we can't have another year like this. Yeah. And as well as like Lindsay studying business as a subject
And as well as us now running a business for the last few years, which we have gained a lot of experience, and that's why we're talking about this, because we want to pass it on. But it's that specific experience that you can't really, I wouldn't say you get, unless you're speaking to people who are being really honest with you and are in your industry, because this is quite a unique situation. You know, we're not talking about a big business where the work is distributed amongst people. For the majority of us, we won't be working as big teams where, you know, we're covering scale and masses of weddings and then we're dishing out the work. It is going to be you and maybe your partner, but more than likely most people working on their own. And they might not be in a position to like outsource any editing or any of the other admin tasks that you've got in your business. So as well as all the admin tasks and, you know, general day-to-day running of the business and dealing with all the inquiries, you are literally, you know, that you're it. And then you're trying to do all the editing and then you're shooting on the weekends. It's something that I think when you first start, I know that the first year or so definitely just was like, oh, this is awesome. Like we just get to go and do this awesome stuff, like shooting weddings on a weekend, because pretty much at that point weddings were on a weekend, whereas now it's like all the time. And you know, you did weddings on a weekend, you'd shoot one or two, and yeah, occasionally three. But not at that point, because early on it was to be fair, early on it was like probably one every couple of weeks / once a month, wasn't it? That's first year or two.
Yeah.
We didn't have anywhere near the volume of the third year. Yeah. And so you were kind of really led into this false sense of security because you had like a week or two to edit a film. And you usually had periods where you had massive breaks as well to catch up. Let's go back to 2019. There was no breaks and there was no, oh, great, this week we've just got one wedding. Because when you're doing 40 odd weddings, or even more, can you imagine 50, 60, 70? You know, you're doing that weddings. Even if you sort of like think, oh, well, there's 52 weeks in a year, I'll do one every Friday or I'll do one every Saturday. No, it's not. That's not going to work out. For a start, you're not going to get any time off. You're not going to take any holidays. You're not going to do anything other than work. It doesn't work like that in terms of the inquiries and the bookings you get. You know, there are specific parts of the year, specific dates. I'm not, you know, this probably sounds like I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but I do think that until you've properly gone through that period of where it just explodes, you just don't realise, because you think, oh, well, I'll take on 2 this weekend. And then you get to a weekend when you've taken on 3. And sometimes 4 or 5 in a week, you know, especially like last year, that's the kind of proposition, and potentially this year that could happen as well. The inquiries we're seeing at the moment, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday, it's every day of the week there's inquiries. And not all the time, but, you know, venues are obviously putting people in wherever they can.
Absolutely. I've just had to, so we have there's an area, so a Yorkshire area photographers and videographers Facebook group that we're part of. And a regular thing that all of us do is if we receive an inquiry for a date that we're booked for, but we're unable to do it, what we say to those people is that because we've had the pleasure of being able to work with some fantastic suppliers in the wedding industry previously, that we'd love to be able to kind of make recommendations to them, even though we can't personally help them. So today I've put 2 on the Facebook group for us, both weekday weddings.
Really? They're both weekdays?
Both weekday weddings.
And we're already booked?
June and August.
Right.
June and August this year, 22.
So what I can say is if you'd have gone back a couple of years, the idea of being already booked for a midweek wedding inquiry, that's insane. Now, that's actually sort of how it is, and I imagine for this year and potentially beyond this year, because of the general backlog of everything, I think it could just be like that. Now, that sounds great if you're hungry and you just want to work all the time and you think, yes, there's loads of work out there. That is great. Problem is, if you just keep taking jobs and you get to that point where you're doing 2 in a weekend and then you're doing 3 in a weekend, and then you end up with, on the bounce, multiple weekends where you've got 2 or 3. In 1 month, and this happened to us in 2021, the worst month, which is odd, was October. So the worst month is in, not worst, busiest. I mean, it was a good month financially, but, you know, there was, within a 4-week period, there was 11 weddings. Well, there are some wedding photographers and videographers that might not think that's too crazy. For me, and for the majority of people that do this, that's a large number. And when you're doing video particularly, if you're doing it in the way that we're doing it, and that I see a lot of people doing it, you're editing, unless you're completely outsourcing it, it's going to take you multiple days. Yeah. If you're just starting out, it's potentially going to take you multiple weeks to do one film. And so if you get 11 weddings in 1 month, in a 4-week period, and you're doing multiple weekends where you do 2 or 3 within a small space of time, very quickly you go from, I'm in control of this, to I'm now 10 deep backlogged, I'm now 20 deep backlogged, and that's basically, I'm still doing October and November weddings now in February. Yeah.
And just, I think it's probably worth mentioning, I just thought of this, because as well we're kind of trying to just put the spotlight on your health and well-being as well within this sort of period of time. You know, watching you over the past few months, there's been a couple of times where it's not only been about, okay, creatively, how do I still make this an individual piece of work, a meaningful piece of work for this particular client based on what they've told me. Okay, that was October. That's when we did 11. Okay, they're files now.
Yeah.
For that film. The anxiety that I have seen you experience just in terms of storing and managing files.
Oh, that's a really good point. And actually it's a really good topic for another episode because, that when you're doing this volume of work, the storage, particularly with video, but it's same with photo, you know, the storage and management of files is very challenging. You need to be really organising on the ball, and that's another thing you can be organising in this time that we will talk about. So just before we move on, just to wrap that up, because we just wanted to give you the kind of, I think what we're talking about here is we're trying to give you the insight that we have gained that you might not have gained yet. Or you might have gained it and you might be able to completely empathise with. And that is why what we're going to talk about next is so important. And just to kind of, in that space of time as well, in 2021, just to give you some broad thing here, Lindsay was actually doing a job as a teacher for a number of months. Well, throughout it really, until kind of the back end of the year. And we've got a young family, we've got 2 young kids, and we were having pretty much the entire downstairs of our house redone, as in we were knocking walls through and stuff, which wasn't intended. That was totally supposed to be done, you know, at the start of the year, and just didn't end up happening at the start of the year. Ended up happening in the second half, well, the last sort of third of the year, right when everything just went batshit crazy. So, and that's what life throws at you, and that's why you have to plan. That's why you have to look at this stuff in advance. Yeah. So we need to look at what workload we're going to do, what the workload we're going to take on in relation to our revenue goal. So your revenue goal will be different to our revenue goal. There'll be people who've got revenue goals where they're aiming to make hundreds of thousands a year out of wedding photography and videography. That's going to be this tiny proportion. Okay? Some people will be doing it as a side hustle, as something that they're going to do to supplement their income or make a little bit of extra money alongside another job. So those two extremes are very different. Okay? Everybody else who's doing this as a full-time job, or a couple that are doing it as their full-time job, like we are, we have got to be realistic about what we want and need to earn. And we're going to go into pricing and talk about that in more detail in a future episode. But we've got to be aware of that. And then we've got to work out how much we're going to need to make to meet that amount. And that's going to go into the pricing structure, and we'll talk about that in the future. So for us, we've got to earn somewhere between, as a very bare minimum, 50, 60 grand a year up to the VAT threshold. That's our rough target. I would suggest that should be most people's rough target. For us, obviously, there's two of us, so we need it to be slightly higher. You might be able to survive off less than that. Your business might have much lower running costs than ours does. And you might be able to kind of live off a smaller amount, or take a smaller amount out of your business in terms of revenue. Mm-hmm. But that's basically, you need to know what that figure is.
Yeah.
So work that out, and that's going to be based on your personal finances. Yeah. We can't tell you what they are because we don't know, but everybody's energy bills and bloody interest rates are going up. So you've got to take these things into consideration. You've got to know what you're going to spend every month, what your bills are, what you want to be able to live a meaningful life and do things and buy whatever it is that you want to buy, put food on the table, pay for your kids, coats and shoes. Bloody hell, how many coats and shoes you buy for kids, I tell you.
The seasons come and go.
So you need to know that, and then you need to look at how much that actually equates to across the year. So if you want to break it down monthly, you can divide it by 12. If you want to look at it as a weekly amount you need to earn, you can do it by 52. But essentially, you can look and see if you want to make £60,000 a year over the year, that is essentially going to be £5,000 per calendar month. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yep.
And that is just a really good sort of exercise to do. And I'm not suggesting you're going to make 60 grand as in that's what you're putting in your pocket. But I mean, when you've taken your business costs out or whatever. So, whatever it costs to run your business, and you need to consider all the taxes and everything. But yeah, you've got to think about it like that. And that gives you a start for 10. And then with the pricing stuff we'll look at, then you can work out what you need to charge per wedding. In this, what we're going to talk about is how many weddings you're actually going to do. And also planning when you're going to take a holiday or time off, other stuff that you're going to want to do in that year.
Absolutely, yeah. Different things that you're going to want to share with family, because we mentioned that also we were going to talk about wellbeing in this, and I think it's safe to say that's something that we didn't. So, we told you in the first episode, actually consciously structuring our goals and targets was not something that we've consciously done over the past few years. It's something that we are making the effort to do now. And with part and parcel of that, we've recognised that we need to take care of ourselves in that as well.
Yeah, time off.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And a manageable workload. Because what I'll tell you is I've still got the backlog to work through, but I'm sure Lindsay can see a difference in me personally these last few weeks, because I've basically said, look, to myself, I've said, I've got to work through these weddings, but we aren't shooting anymore at the moment. So I've got a bit more leeway. So I'm not accumulating anymore at the moment. So I feel like I've just got to work through it. So when it's time to work, I put the work in, but I'm making the effort to not work 12 to 15 hour days, and every day of the week I'm trying to fit other things in. I'm going to go for a beer with my mate tonight. There's no way I'd have done that 3 months ago, because I just wouldn't have felt like I could. No. I was too busy. I felt like I couldn't take the time away to do something that everybody else would see as a normal thing to do. What I held up just then before, for anybody who's watching on the video would have seen, and I'm sorry if we can't force it down the microphone, unfortunately. But we've got a chart here. It's a wall calendar like you'd buy in a stationery shop or order offline. And it's essentially just a calendar that goes through the days and weeks and months. And what we do is we put that on the wall. We've had one for every year so far. We've got one for this year, and we've bought one for next year, so we can start planning that in advance. And that's a visual thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's something that we can visually look at. We can put different coloured stickers on for different things.
Yep.
For whether it's a film job, a photography job, a film and photography job. If there's a commercial job in that time, we can put that on, or like some other commitment work-wise that we've got. We're not going to put the tiny little things like calls and things like that.
No.
And like meetings. They'll be managed in a different way. We'll discuss in a second. But it's the big things. The big things that we know are going to have some consequences, as in we've got to be somewhere that day for this whole day pretty much, or half the day, and then there's going to be some work after.
Yeah.
So Lindsay's gone through and put the stickers on so we can see visually where which weekends or which days we've got stuff on, and then also made some notes of other things that we've got on, like when we've booked a holiday, and when we've got other things. This is a visual thing for us to look at on the wall and see where the gaps are, see where things are a little less intense, so that we can then visually sort of see where we should be trying to get a little bit more work, or where we don't want any more work to come in.
No, that's right. And that in its own right. So we're both, and it may be for you that you know, visual things don't necessarily work, but for us, just being able to see that right there on the wall, like you say, that's just straight away, rather than opening up our CRM program and having to go through month by month. Right. Okay, no, it's just there for us, and that's something that we think is really helpful. It does just be able to, at a glance, like you said, just see where the gaps are. And then you'll pair that, won't you, with, like you touched on, thinking about what your costs, but also your pricing strategies. And that's where that kind of comes back into that, because you'll be looking at, well, okay, what I can see plotted on the wall already, that tells me that that's going to generate this amount of revenue for us. So actually, in terms of what we need, okay, let's look at where the gaps are then, and where should we be trying to look for opportunities to...
So for instance, you know, I can just tell you, because we've done this exercise in the last few days, that our July is actually... Is it July or is it? No, it's July, isn't it? Our July is actually not too bad. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. We've booked a holiday for the first time in several years, and we're going on that early August. Again, that's very that's a bit crazy for me, because August is potentially the busiest month for a wedding photographer and videographer. I know that it was in the previous years. So it doesn't really make sense, does it? Taking potentially your best earning time and your biggest time for gaining revenue. But it's the kids' school holidays.
It is, and it's a pertinent one for us, because we've hit that threshold, haven't we? We'll hit that point where we can't get away with taking the kids out of school anymore, because our eldest daughter starts high school in September, and so it's kind of, you know, for her as well. We want to make sure that she's had a nice holiday, and we've spent that time all together and with extended family as well. And like you say, we've not been able to do that. We deserve,
you know, I'm not saying we deserve to no one deserves to go on holiday, but, you know, if you're going to give yourself, you basically should be taking time off. And we haven't been on holiday for a few years. It seems like that it's definitely the right thing to do. So we needed to do it then. And actually, the school holidays, it's important to both of us. And this is something, again, that factors into how you plan things, because it's not just about your business. It's about, you're doing this for you. You're doing it you're working to provide for your life, not the other way around. And so for us, it's important when the kids are off school, we're going to be able to spend some time with them. So having a quieter July and taking some time off in August, actually makes a bit of sense. But there is a bit of capacity in July. There's a little bit in April. There's definitely some January, February, March, because we've got very little on, and that's sort of what we do. That's why we can catch up. And then obviously the back end of the year, at the moment, the autumn months, that's where we need to kind of pick up some work as well. So I can tell you that, just like that, I can tell you exactly what we need to do because we've looked at it. And if you haven't looked at it and you don't know how on earth can you be like confident that you're going to be okay financially, and B, how do you know what you're going to do to plug those gaps? You know, because the work doesn't just boom, it comes. You've got to kind of, sometimes you've got to look for it, and how we might plug those gaps if weddings don't get booked in the coming months is we might look to do something else. We might look to do some commercial work, and we might start looking at where we can get that. But more than likely, you'll see the bookings come in, and then slowly over the year, you're tracking it on this calendar, and you're tracking it through your CRM and everything, and you're watching, you know, the calendar filling up. But you're also watching that it doesn't fill up too much, and you don't end up with a month where you've got 15 weddings, and then, you know, months where you don't have any at all. You want to try and even it out as best you can. Won't always work, but that's what you're aiming for. So other things, I've talked about that probably a little bit longer than I intended to. Surprise, surprise. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the other stuff that you might consider using, and that would be like a CRM. So we use Studio Ninja. You can use, there's lots of different CRMs that you could use. The thing about using a CRM is that, well, put it this way, I wouldn't be without one now, and I love using Studio Ninja, but
what did we perhaps? Sorry, just to interrupt you. So before we started to use our CRM, how did we do it? And I think perhaps I can't remember.
So how did we do it?
A spreadsheet.
Was it?
A spreadsheet and the calendar, and physically inputting, you know, dates and that was it. So in a very, very basic form. But I think it was outside of that as well. It was as the number of clients that we were working with, as that was increasing, it was becoming more and more difficult to actually manage the communications with them.
Yeah, the communications and the data management, just keeping track of everything in one place, nightmare. So we started using the CRM quite early on. I'm very glad we did. I think if there's one piece of advice I could give you for your business, like something that's actually worth spending your money on, you know, it would be that. And I know lots of people don't use something like that, and I have no idea how they manage, because I know we couldn't. It'd just drive us insane. So using something like that is great because, for instance, on the dashboard function on Studio Ninja, it will actually show you the revenue of how much, you know, you're going to generate in a period of time. So you can set that to whatever your earnings year is, your tax year is, or whatever, depending on how it's set, because we're a limited company, ours is different to the normal tax year. So it's good to be able to look at that at a glance, because it just makes you feel like, right, we're on track. You can look at things by month as well, and it helps you to, so there's an overview point there. And you can also like look at the list of jobs, and you can see what's there and what have you. Day to day, we've got all our calendars linked up to stuff, don't we? So our iCalendar on us phones, or like Google Calendar, they basically, everything feeds into that, so that day to day we can check if we've got a meeting, an appointment, things like that. And that's how we're tracking those things. Studio Ninja, Calendly that we use. I'm not going to go into detail with these, because they're different topics in themselves. But all of these things feed into our calendar on our iPhone, and then we can see what's going on each day, or we can have a look at the week view. If you're not doing these things, honestly, you are making it really hard for yourself. I don't know how we would manage without this stuff now. It just really helps us keep track. But you might be the person that likes to use pen and paper. So even if it's just tracking it in a calendar, a diary, a notepad.
whatever
that
works for you. That's definitely, sorry.
Yeah.
Definitely. There'll be so many, there are so many different tools and pieces of software now, apps even, but if you prefer good old fashioned paper based, like Jules showed you with the calendar, that's a paper based thing, that's visual for us. That's not on a device necessarily, though that information's derived from somewhere else that we've got it. But it's the things that we share with you on here. We're trying to kind of raise your awareness to the sort of importance of these things, and then we will share with you personally what are either our experiences of this or the things that we're actively using or that we've tried and tested. But we're by no means, saying, for instance, Studio Ninja is who our CRM is. They're in no way affiliated with this particular podcast. We're not sponsored by them or anything like that. That's just information that we're sharing with you. You yourself will seek out, you will find, and you will know what kind of tools and methods work for you when it comes to the management of your clients and your business. Yeah.
And sort of to go into kind of another level of this, you could be, to help you, putting things in place in this quieter period, how you're going to manage your workload on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. The reason you might do that is because it feeds into how you're going to plan your months and your year. So, for example, if it takes you a month to edit a wedding film, you're probably going to want to take on less than 10 wedding films a year. If you're a wedding photographer that can edit a whole gallery in one day and have it to the client, then, shooting one day, editing one day, 2 days boxed off, you're going to have time to be able to shoot a lot more weddings. So having knowledge of, an experience of how long it's going to take you to do certain tasks, and then planning those tasks so that you know when you're going to do them. For example, you might have a sort of a way of doing things where you're going to be shooting a wedding probably on Saturday or maybe Friday. So you take Sunday off to be with your family. Again, everyone's circumstances are different. Monday is your first editing day, and then Tuesday's another editing and work day, and then you've got Wednesday for some admin. Thursday you could do client calls and things like that. I'm not suggesting you have to break down a whole day to do these things. What I'm saying is, I'll explain how we do it. Well, up and sometimes just work all the time, but that's why we're having this conversation. So typically, Sunday we want to have off if we've worked on the weekend. If we've worked on the Saturday, we want to do something with the kids on Sunday. And then Monday, want to start getting on with stuff and editing. But, hopefully you'll have downloaded everything, but you're going to still need to organise the files. Start doing some editing work. It's going to take multiple days to edit that wedding. And a good thing, it might take a couple of days. It might take a week if it's a more complicated project. So you're going to, and when I say editing, I'm talking about all the process of like uploading everything. So in and amongst that, you're also going to have to do like client calls on Zoom or meetings. You're going to have to answer emails and things like that. We're fortunate, we work together, so we split those tasks, but also we try to do them at different times. So we try to kind of like do emails at a certain time, whether that's first thing in the morning or in the evening. Client calls, we'll do those. We'll block those off in Calendly and people can book those in. And that helps us to plan when those are going to be. So they're on specific dates between specific times so that we know if there's anything else we need to do or be at places we need to be, we can arrange that around that. That's just to give you an example of how you might manage your week, because we're talking about managing your week, month, year. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
And I think that for today, that was the purpose really, was to kind of highlight the importance of understanding your workload and planning and just managing that, bringing into it how it's so important that we consider our well-being. It's so important that you consider sort of looking after yourself in and amongst all of this, Jules touched on the costs and understanding pricing strategies and things, and those are all part and parcel of it, and are things that we'll cover in the next episode. But really, as a starting point, having set the goals now, we wanted to just move on to, okay, how does this work then when it comes to managing your workload?
Yeah.
Okay. We've shared a little bit about, again, our own sort of personal setup, and the disclaimer I'll always put on things is that, you know, we're certainly not speaking with you here and preaching to have it all figured out and to, you know, to have a perfect balance, and it's all a life of Zen and all of that. Absolutely not. You know, we are
working towards that.
working towards it, but, you know, all the time learning ourselves, trying and testing, learning ourselves, and we just wanted to share sort of that kind of little bit of an insight with you as well. So, you know, hopefully, in trying to perhaps encourage you to consider what might work for you when you're thinking about your health and well-being, gaining a balance alongside your workload. Maybe you might be able to take one or two things out of what we've talked about today, you know, and if you do, we'd love to hear about that. It could also be that you've got your own ideas, you know, and maybe you want to share those with us as well, and it'd be fantastic to hear from you. So please reach out to us at Wedding Mavericks and tell us all about that. Okay, thank you.
So just want to say before we go, thanks to Divine Studios for sponsoring the podcast. We will talk about them again in more detail in the next episode, in relevance to the pricing topic that we're talking about. But, you know, Divine are a creative agency based in Leeds, and they, you know, are the perfect sort of people for us to partner with because we use their services. We believe in what they do and what they can add to your business. And if you're looking for like any branding work or web development work, design work, please reach out to them. And if you quote Wedding Mavericks, you'll get a 10% discount on the services. And thanks Divine for sponsoring the podcast. So we're going to wrap it up here. In next episode, we're going to be talking about pricing for your wedding photography, videography business, how to create strategies that mean you're going to be able to have a more sustainable business and figure out what you're going to charge rather than just picking a random figure out of the air, which, you know, if I'm being honest, I think that's what most people are doing. Try and have a proper conversation with people about pricing. Nobody really wants to talk about money. That's that British thing, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah. It's like, it's either they don't want to talk about it because we're too like, oh, we don't want to talk about money, that's a dirty word. Or people are just a bit secretive about it because I think, and this is something we'll talk about, but it's, you know, they worry that they're going to get undercut or that by giving that information, it's going to affect them in some way. Yeah. It's not. I think if we actually talk about it openly, it actually helps us all from an industry perspective to talk about it. But there you go. So we're going to be talking about pricing, and we're going to be like straight up about it. And hopefully that's going to be a really helpful episode because I think that's such a topic that I know I've tried to get those answers, and we have changed our prices so many times, haven't we? Yeah. So it's a huge topic. We're going to be discussing that in the next one, so please join us if you think that's going to be helpful. But for now, we'll see you.